we're here with special guest Jeff Leason. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks much. This is fantastic. I've never been to Nashville or this convention, so I'm pretty darn excited.
Now, you're a legend in the role-playing game world. Give us some background. What exactly did you do early on in Dungeons & Dragons?
I'm not even a legend in my own mind. The first thing I started working at when I graduated high school in 1978, started working for TSR in August. First thing I worked on was Dungeon Master's Guide First Edition. First solo project was the first color catalog, the Gateway to Adventure catalog. And then the first module I worked on was with Harold Johnson for Gen Con East in 1979. So that's the Hidden Shrine of Tomoe-chin. Worked for TSR until 86 when they purged like 150 of us. And then that same year I started working for Mayfair Games, became a managing editor. I was in charge of their Roll Aids line, which was Dungeons & Dragons, as well as their chill horror role-playing game line.
All right, so let's talk about early role-playing gaming in the 1970s. So before it was role-playing game, what was it?
Well, when I started, it was 1975 or 76, so I started in Boy Scouts. I learned from Skip Williams, who learned from Gary. So it was basically...
A lot of wargaming going on during that period, right?
Exactly. Very much so. That's where we started. Alexander the Great and lots of fantastic Avalon Hill games, SPI games. Yeah, we started that way and then went into chainmail, of course, and then D&D. And I didn't save half the stuff from back in the day because we didn't think it was going to be what it is. So
let's go to chainmail. Let's talk about chainmail, okay. Like the precursor to D&D. Just say, what was it like playing that during that time period?
It was cool because Jeff Perrin was there, so we played with the author. But extremely basic. And then just me being a kid juiced us up like crazy to, miniatures. And that's where my love of miniatures started. And then I've been collecting miniatures since 76, so that's my love.
So let's talk about the early days working with Gary Gygax.
Oh, the best of times and the best of times, because just about everybody roommated with another TSR person. So you'd wake up in the morning, you'd go to work if it were shipping or wherever, and that's where I started. Then we'd all go out to lunch, and then when work was over, we'd play test games and play games. And then since we all lived with each other, for production, editing, everybody got to edit to proof to make sure everything was cool. So we lived and breathed gaming almost 24/7. The only time we didn't was when we were sleeping or going to the bathroom. It was the perfect...
So you're talking total immersion at those early stages.
It was the most incredible, fun thing for an 18-year-old. Just getting out of, my first real job.
You're getting paid to have fun. That's probably what you viewed it as, right?
Paid for playing games, and then every time a new game came out, we got a free copy of it. I play tested most everything. I was the design guy for Knights of Camelot as well as Divine Right. And then for Mayfair Games, I worked on board games as well. Did role-playing stuff. I have 7 things published or something like that. But yeah, that early TSR days, it's like a miracle in working and like everybody's dream, and it really was. I think everybody got along with everybody. I was the 17th employee, so there wasn't very many of us. 3 of us were in shipping. But we all got along. We played games. We play-tested games for conventions. Gary ran his game. Brian Bloom ran, the vice president, ran Boot Hill because that's what he was into. So we played all the role-playing games back then, our role-playing games. So it was just, I say I'm probably the luckiest guy that I know that was in the right place at the right time. Mm-hmm. And that's the honest-to-God truth. And then now with the museum and everything, I was at Geek Nation Tours. I don't know if you've ever heard it. It's based out of Canada, and it's high-end. Costs I think this year about $4,900, but it's all inclusive. You'll play in Gary Gygax's house, 330 Center Street. 723, where our museum is, that was the first hobby shop, the first TSR building, and the first, and really only, TSR periodicals. And that was the first building I worked at. So TSR just expanded and expanded. It never got dull. It never... towards the end there, when other people got involved and Gary went out to California, that's when the bad things happened. And but I'm just really lucky to be part of it.
Give us some stories and anything interesting that happened when the early days of D&D when you were there.
Okay, so I was assistant manager in the Dungeon Hobbyshop, which was just a huge hobby shop. We had all the miniatures back then. A lady comes in and she says, "I'd like to see your magic items." It was like, okay, they're all on the wall. Archive makes them, and all the miniature companies make these little. No, she says, "I want to see the real magic items." And I said, no, you don't understand. This is role playing. This represents me. This is what my weapon is. She goes, "Well, I'm from the representative from the Baptist Church," and so we just wanted to see what was going on because of the bad things we heard.
That was the heyday of just being fearful of everything, music and games.
The Satanic Panic.
Yes.
Yeah. And I took her downstairs. We had a sand table for playing miniature battles. Showed her shipping, so she didn't think, oh, yeah, they hide them, they sacrifice babies in the back somewhere. And by the time she left, she was really appreciative. She thought that was really cool. I called up Gary right away, said, told him what happened, and best thing he ever said to me, my nickname's Duck. And he said, "Duck, you did an excellent job." And I was like, holy crap, the praise from man on high. So that was probably one of the coolest experiences, just because it took me unawares. I didn't even, wasn't like, ooh, trying to think of stuff to say. It just all came kind of naturally. So
yeah, nice.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
You're talking about the Dungeon Master's Guide. Talk a little bit about your work there.
Okay, so I was working in shipping still, but Mike Carr was managing editor. And I was pretty good I never went to college, but I was really good at English. So he said, "Oh, you want to proof it?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll proof it." So it was in blue lines, and blue lines is before it's printed. So it's on it's light-sensitive paper. And if you write on it and it goes through, then that will be printed in the book, which I didn't know because I was a shipper. So I get the blue lines, and I'm writing the margin. It's, "Mike, don't you think this should say something like that?" We get the final proof back, and it's printed in the margin. So I said, this is really convoluted, and some of the wording is just really screwed up. And he said, "Don't even go there. That's Gary." He said, "I've gone to Gary and said, this will make it clear. This is Gary speak." And talking to people over the years, both Gary and Ernie, his oldest son, they have a certain way of speaking, which is not direct. They get to it, but it's kind of like a sideways attack of what they're talking about. Yeah, so when it's all written down in the book, and their game rules, it's kind of like, what did he just say? And someone Dave just read me a sentence out of the DMG, and he says, "So here you go, look at this sentence." I was like, yeah, that was one that... Mike said, "Don't go to Gary." He said, "I've already gone there, and don't go there. This is the way it is." So, but Gary was not not mean or bad or a stickler. It was just, this is the way he wanted it because this was his game. So we just accepted it. It was all good.
So let's talk about playtesting. What were some of the games you were playtesting in the late 70s?
Holy crap. Let's see. Every game that came out in the late 70s to mid 80s, Knights of Camelot, like I said, Divine Right, Fourth Dimension was already done, Dungeon was already done, but we played the living heck out of that game. And it's still a fun game. Basic Dungeon. I don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah.
Still
nice.
Classic. Still classic.
Okay, so when you were playtesting these games, were there any moments where you looked at it and said, "This is an extreme flaw, we have to change it"?
All the time, actually. Because most people, even in editing, most people are focused on one thing. And if you go through and you find all the mistakes, a lot of times you don't. And that was part of it. It's like, Dave McGarry, Dungeon, even though that was already done, it's like, this would be cool if you did this. I don't think this is right. And everybody's like, oh, thanks. I hadn't thought of that. So it was very friendly. Everybody got along. Everybody was gamers, but Kevin and Mimi Bloom, who were accountants. There was another accountant wannabe. Brian was a damn good player. And everybody else played. So it was, what are you guys doing this weekend? Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm working on, Knights of Camelot. Well, let's all play. Yeah. So we did that. We went to Mike Carr and Brian Bloom's place and played day-long Divine Right games. Mm-hmm. One of the longest games ever. We play tested another version added on, which made the game even more fun. But then it lasted 18 hours instead of only 14 hours. Mm-hmm. So, and I was lucky that I got to play all the games. Most all games with all the authors. So, Fight in the Skies or Dawn Patrol, World War I, Mike Carr. Well, he was my boss, managing editor. So, I got to play games with him. I mean, I'm extremely lucky. I'm extremely lucky.
All right, so let me ask you, especially with the historic games, did you have a background in history, or did the gaming make you want to learn more about history?
I hated history in high school, and now I love the heck out of high school. I like ancient history because you have to have a pair to walk up and stab some guy.
I've said that 100 times before, that I've learned so many things because of wanting to game. I want to understand it better, so I've learned more about history because of that.
Yep, the way armor works and why things changed, and we didn't do a whole lot of historic games, even though we played the living daylights out of them. I couldn't even.
But even when you look at Dungeons and Dragons, there is something like you were talking about, the armor, the weights of things,
yep. and the weights and things, and that all makes sense.
Why do you need two hands for this sword, but one hand for this sword? Like everything about it is like, I got to find out now because I want to understand this game better.
And then you look at pictures of weapons, is that why that's a two-handed sword or a hand and a half or a bastard sword or whatever.
Yes.
So Oriental Adventures, when that came out, I think I was working in the hobby shop then, so I didn't have anything to do with that. But that gave the whole flavor of anything Asian, all the weapons and the armor and everything.
Yes.
So we're hopefully going to expand on that line in the Dungeon Hobbyshop / TSR Museum.
Okay.
Because we're going to be a museum, also a gaming club, but we're also going to design and edit and games and stuff, modules and stuff. So,
now you were there when the Red Box came out.
Correct.
What was the response of the Red Box initially?
Well, the weird thing was TSR was running out of stuff to put out. It's like, what do we put out now? And you just don't want to put, and we didn't even want to do adventures in the beginning because we thought adventures were stupid. No one would buy them. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden they came out with a couple adventures and people just went ape gaga. Mm-hmm. So we had no idea what to do. So they came up with the Red Box, and it just took off. It was a project just to fill that month or whatever, a major project. It wasn't even wasn't anything that we were going to massively support or anything. And it was perfect timing when that came out. It just hit and flew. So that's the best. One of the best-selling games that TSR did. So, and then there's a bunch of background stuff that I'd talk to you about, but I wouldn't do it on tape. I'd just do it about that whole thing. If you wanted to know some personality stuff.
That's so funny.
Yeah, so.
Now, with regards to, you're talking about the era of the Satanic Panic. Mm-hmm. What was the overall feel in the offices at that time? Was there fear?
No. Gary's response, all publicity is good publicity.
That's what I was to understand. Yes, so that's true.
We just went. It was like, and I don't remember his last name. It was Egbert, and he was missing. Do you remember Egbert's last name? He was a college student in Indiana, I think, and they played D&D in the steam tunnels, and he became missing, but he was at a friend's house, didn't tell his folks, so. Then the parents say, "Oh my gosh, look at all this D&D stuff! Oh, and they have the steam tunnels mapped out. So now they're living this game. Well, Egbert was staying at a friend's house, had nothing to do with D&D, but then all this bad publicity, he died because...
It just snowballed.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And then it always, anytime any publicity hit, it was big, and then stuff flew out the door even faster.
I was of that age group. I heard that, and I said, well, I got to find out about this. Exactly. This seems crazy.
Yeah. And one of the weirdest things, talking to my dad in later years, my mom thought that D&D was demon worshiping. Mm-hmm. I was in Boy Scouts, so I was like 12. Mm-hmm. And my dad, being blue collar and didn't even finish high school, said, Mom, he's playing D&D with his friends. They're Boy Scouts, all of his friends. If he gets in trouble, we'll take it away. Otherwise, just let him be. Mm-hmm. And if it hadn't been for Dad, and who knew nothing about D&D, I could have been sacrificing babies, and he wouldn't have known. But he was just saying, let a boy be a boy.
James Dallas Egbert.
Oh, there you go, James Dallas Egbert. Yeah. So, I was extremely lucky, because if Dad hadn't said that to Mom, my life would be completely different.
Interesting.
And then you'd be saying, and I'd be saying, would you like paper or plastic with that, sir? So,
yes. What do you think is the reason why Dungeons and Dragons has been popular for all these decades through many iterations?
The cool thing about fantasy stuff, especially D&D, is you can just keep adding and adding in mythology and stuff. I don't necessarily like the way that AD&D has progressed. One was needed help because it was the first one. That's fine. Two, you might as well call one. 3.5, I just looked at. I was told about it. Now 5, I played 5e. I never played 4e. 5e I played once and had the most fun of my life.
Yeah.
And every time I say that, some people are like, "Oh, we don't like Ernie Gygax. No, we don't. 5th edition. We don't." It's like, it's D&D. So hopefully I get to play in 5th edition, because I want to learn it, so I can actually run it at the Hobbyshop Museum, because it's also a gaming club. So I want to run a weekly campaign, 1st edition, and then trying to get my friend Dave's brother Dan to do a 5th edition, because I like it so much.
All right, let's talk about the museum. When was it established? Where is it?
Wow.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's the weirdest thing in the world, and this is a long story. You might want to sit down. My life has been pretty weird. 2020 was probably the best year of my life, even though people died and COVID went everywhere. But I ended up being on disability. I have an eye disease and arthritis and stuff, old fart people things. So I finally got that, and it's like, oh, God be praised. So, or the gods be praised. So I'm at GaryCon running a D&D game for 12 people, and a guy comes in late, and I said, well, sit down here, pull up a chair, you can sit right next to me. Anything you see, anything I'm running, you look at it, you won't even know what the hell it means. So he sits down and says, hi, I'm Jason. And I'm usually pretty good at names. By the end of the adventure, I know everybody's name. And so I would say everybody have fun, because that's what we're aiming for, and everybody had a hell of a good time. So throughout the convention, I saw Justin say, hey, Justin, how's it going? Well, then Geek Nation Tour happens, and I met him, and that was it. This was three GaryCons ago. So I contact him, and I say, hey, there's Geek Nation Tours is coming to Lake Geneva. Is that something you're interested in? And he signed up. So I was one of the featured game masters. Jim Ward, Tom Wam, myself, and Ernie were the featured game masters. So Justin goes there. So we're taking the tour of Lake Geneva. So you have the where the Gygaxes are buried, all the 4 different TSR buildings when they were blah blah blah, so Justin's there, and we get to the building. We're at 723 William Street, which again is now the museum. We're not open yet, but we should be as soon as we get zoned for the parking lot. But we walked by this place, and I said, oh, that's the first place I worked, and that was the first TSR, Dungeon Hobbyshop, and periodicals. And he says, Ernie, see if they want to contact a realtor, see if they want to sell that, because there was no sign or anything. Ernie said, I'm not going to do that, because Ernie needs to get something out of. He doesn't do things for nothing. So to make a long story short, we're at 2020. He calls me in January. He says, I bought the building. He said, I want you to be the curator, I want you to be the manager, and I want you to be the head designer. Wow. And this is after 4 years I had to sell my game collection to survive, and I mean, I was the lowest of low, and then all of a sudden, boom, and he appeared. So I've known this guy for, I think, 3 years in March, and he's given me the world. We got one, so the museum is extremely small. The house that is really small. I have an apartment upstairs. Gary's old office is upstairs. We have that so people can come up there and see where his, and then also Tim Cask's. I'm staying in Brian Bloom's old office, Mike Carr's old office, and then the art department is my apartment. We're going to feature gaming. It's a game club. You can buy memberships, buy old gaming things. You can loan, you can donate, you can sell, and we're basically looking for like early 80s to mid 80s stuff, because as soon as it was 1979, I think, is when we moved out of that building and moved downtown to the really huge building. So we're trying to collect things from the earlier era, so like business cards and stuff, and we've been really fortunate that I get along with pretty much everybody. So when people are starting to sell stuff, it's like, hey, do you think we can just loan that to us? Don't give it to us. Just loan it to us. Don't sell it. It'll be worth more in the future. Or I'll give you money for it, and it'll be on loan, and then you give me the money back. And it's just so exciting. I'm actually down now where people game. I'm now home. It's just incredible. It's one of the best things ever.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
so that's going to be like a pilgrimage for those of us who really love everything that D&D has done for us.
Lake Geneva is the gaming mecca of the world, if you think about it, role-playing and stuff. Our goal is to get added to the sign. They'll say, welcome to Lake Geneva, home of co-creator of Dungeons & Dragons, Gary Gygax. That's our goal. If the museum doesn't go well, Justin, the owner, said he will... things that belong to Gary that he bought, he will give to back to the family. I mean, that's how nice of a guy he is.
Yeah.
So we have some really deluxe stuff, but it's a very small museum. It's very small. But if you're interested in the early history and stuff, when Ernie runs his games, or he'll talk for days. He'll just talk and tell you stories, because he went out to California, the D&D West, or TSR West coast and stuff. So. But yeah, it's just a wonderful, wonderful place. I would say by June I'll be moved in. Told my cats will be from up north, because I live 5 hours north of Lake Geneva even still. Own a house up there. So I'm going from a 10-room house to a 3-room apartment.
All right.
But it's time to cull stuff. It's just, I sold my gaming collection, didn't want to, but did. So it's just like years of just giving stuff away and stuff. So.
That is so awesome. Well, we look forward to supporting this endeavor.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, it's if you need to contact us, we're at either DungeonHobbyshop.com or TSR.com, and it'll come up with the picture of the old Dungeon Hobby Shop sign that we mimicked almost perfectly, and just write to us, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our Facebook group. Live long, and may the Force be with you. Nanu Nanu.